Did you know that according to God, there is no distinction between Jew and Gentile? Let's talk about it. Shalom and welcome back to this episode of Did You Know? I'm your host, Rabbi Ira, and today we're going to be unpacking some verses that relate to the relationship between Jews and Gentiles in the body of Yeshua. And so I'd like to start with this verse from Galatians chapter 3, beginning in verse 26. For you are all sons of God through trusting or through faith in Messiah Yeshua. For all of you who were immersed in Messiah have clothed yourselves with Messiah. There is neither Jew nor Greek. There is neither slave nor free. There is neither male nor female. For you are all one in Messiah Yeshua. And if you belong to Messiah, then you are Abraham's seed, heirs according to the promise. Now, some have interpreted this to say that, you're no longer, there's no difference, so you don't have to do all these Jewish traditions, the holidays and all that, because we're all Christian, and therefore there's no distinctions. And I believe that's a real misapplication of this passage, because the easy refutation or response to that argument is, well, what about the difference between male and female? Are you saying there's no longer distinction there either? So the obvious answer to that is that before God, there's no distinction. In other words, there's one way of salvation, which is through Messiah Yeshua, as Paul clearly states here. And in that sense, there's no distinction, meaning that it doesn't matter if you're Jewish or not Jewish, male or female, or in this case, slave or free. In other words, you're the boss of your company or you're a lowly employee, whatever, they're still equal. You're still equal before God. However, in that context, though, there are still distinctions, obviously. So just as there are different distinctions between male and female, those are pretty obvious in spite of what some of the leftist woke, would say today about that. But no, biblically speaking, there's male and female. God created them, us, different calling, different purpose, different giftings, and so on, different roles. In the same way, Jews and Gentiles still have a distinction within the body of Messiah. We believe that Jews that are called to faith in Yeshua have a responsibility to live Jewish lives. The feasts, the festivals, as a witness and a testimony of God's irrevocable calling, as Paul spoke about it in Romans chapter 11, the irrevocable calling of Jewish people to live a Jewish life. What that looks like can be different. In our congregation, of course, we have Jews and Gentiles together, and the Gentiles that are part of our congregation feel a calling to be part of our community. We don't say that all Gentiles are to live a Jewish life, but some believe they are called, and in some cases, maybe they're married to a Jew, have a Jewish spouse, and so feel that together this is the way to honor God and for the Jewish spouse to be able to live that Jewish life. And for myself, growing up Jewish in Orthodox synagogue, going to Orthodox Jewish school, we had the traditions and so on, but it wasn't until I came to be a believer in Yeshua that I really understood more and more of the importance and the calling that I have as a Jewish man to live that Jewish life, the feasts, the festivals, the Shabbat, the traditions, and how important they are to continue those for my children and my grandchildren as well. And in the context of Paul's writings, it's interesting because sometimes today, and I grew up the same way, how can a Jew believe in Jesus? That's for the Christians, right? That is not for Jewish people. Well, if you go back into the first century, it was quite the opposite, because if you know the history, all of the first believers in Jesus, in Yeshua, were all Jews in Israel. There was no question about their faith in Yeshua. They now no longer were Jews. No, it was clearly a Jewish faith. They were recognized as Jews, but of course they were considered heretics or whatever. But the question of whether they were still Jews was never a question. And as the faith in Yeshua among the Jewish people grew and grew, there were Gentiles that came to faith as well. And there was the controversy of what are we going to do with these Gentiles that are now coming to faith? Certainly they must become Jews first. They must get circumcised and convert to become Jews first. And then this whole issue was settled in Acts 15 in the Council of Jerusalem, where the decision was made that these Gentiles, that now were coming to faith in Yeshua, they didn't have to get circumcised. They didn't have to, in a sense, convert to Judaism, as long as they refrained from certain things that were considered obstacles to fellowship with Jewish people. Such as things that were eating things that were sacrificed to idols, blood, and so forth. You could read about it in Acts chapter 15. These were essentially what were called the Noahide laws, which were foundations for Gentiles or conditions for Gentiles who wanted to convert to Judaism. But the ruling was they didn't have to, that they could now become one in Messiah. And so there was a lot of controversy over that issue. And in the book of Galatians, there were those called Judaizers. We don't know if they were actually Jews or maybe they were Gentiles who so much embraced the Torah that they went around preaching that Gentiles had to keep, the Torah, all the mitzvot, the commandments of the Torah, to be able to be truly one, with the faith in Yeshua. So Paul is addressing that issue and saying, no, that there is no distinction in terms of how we stand before God, that God's, in Ephesians, he talks about the mystery, which was that Gentiles now could become one in Messiah and become this one new man in Yeshua. Again, not to obliterate the distinctions, but yet there's unity with diversity, that in Messiah we retain our calling, whether we're Jews or Gentiles, but yet before God there is no distinction, that we are one in Him. So if you're watching this and you have any questions about this issue of there is no distinction between Jew and Gentile, bond or free, male or female, I encourage you to post your question or comment about it, and let's talk about it more, because I believe that both within the Jewish world and in the Christian world, there are often misunderstandings about these ideas, that in Yeshua we are one. So as a Jew, I don't lose my Jewishness, my distinctiveness as being a Jewish follower of Yeshua, observing the traditions, the feasts and festivals, Shabbat, and all the things that make up Jewish life and Jewish heritage. And yet, as a Gentile, you don't have to become Jewish and take on all those things. But still, I believe it would be important to understand the Jewish roots of the faith, that it started amongst Jewish men and women in first century Israel, that then it became extended to the Gentiles as well, that Gentiles were welcomed into the community of faith in Yeshua, but they didn't take over the body. They're partakers, not overtakers, that they are grafted in, according to Paul's description in Romans 9, 10, and 11. So I invite you to look at those chapters, and let's continue the discussion. Thanks for watching today. Thank you for watching, and please like, comment, subscribe, and share to our Shalom Boca YouTube channel, and we'll see you next week.